sibheka ezase-Afrika.
Isikhathi ke sayo iAfrica in 10 minutes kule ntambama yanamhlanje. We are joined by Ben Akak, who is Mobile Education Officer ka Wildlife Clubs of Kenya, as well as Margaret Marianne, who is Senior Officer Conservation Education. Yes. Yabo simnandi sibongo sakhe. Good afternoon, Ben and Marianne, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Good afternoon to you all. Pronouncing your names is a little bit challenging for me.
Oh, shame.
But I'm great to be here.
You need a bit of training.
Which one is more difficult, Mbali or Mangaliso?
Mona Liso.
Oh, Mangaliso is difficult.
Yes, we are also joined by Ben Akak.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Ben.
Very good afternoon to you. I think it's a challenge mentioning your name, but you've said Mbali
and Mangaliso.
And Mangaliso.
Oh, God!
Yes! Yes, that was excellent. Yeah, we are very grateful to be joined by you this afternoon. Can you tell us more about African Wildlife Foundation Young Conservation Champion Scholarships?
Let me start out because the Young Conservation Championship is just a component of a Young Conservation Heroes project, a project that we're implementing in the Tsavo Landscape. For the African Wildlife Foundation, we work within a transboundary kind of approach, landscape approach. So the current landscape that we have, the project is the Tsavo Landscape. It's a landscape in Kenya and southern Kenya. So we do have a conservation education project we are implementing together with the Wildlife Clubs of Kenya. So the conservation scholarship is just a sub activity or other component of the project.
Right. Yes.
Probably to go deeper into basically what the project is all about. It's a conservation education project whereby we are reaching out to young people in the landscape because of the issues that we are seeking out to address as an organization. Our main goal is to ignite and nurture a robust conservation movement among children and youth, and to be able to mentor them to champion wildlife conservation, both at the landscape and the national level. And we are doing that together with the Wildlife Clubs of Kenya through some of the interventions that we have, including even scaling up the conservation education work that Wildlife Clubs of Kenya is doing. And that is by building the capacity of them to be able to reach out to a further, larger kind of scope. We've supported the organization in terms of having a 5-year strategic plan in place. They will be able now to channel out not only to the landscape, but in a broader aspect to the Kenyan learners in our schools. And equally, we are reaching out as a program, we are reaching out 137 schools. What I can retrieve back what I was initially sharing in terms of the interventions that we are using to reach out to these young people. One of them is to be able to support the big organization in terms of Kenya Wildlife Clubs of Kenya to broaden their reach in terms of strategically developing a strategy plan to reach out and develop a business plan on how best they can support that strategic plan. Equally, we're also looking into supporting the development of a conservation education curriculum and educators guide. At the moment, as in Kenya, we do have different curriculum, just addressing some of the components, narrowing down to specific areas that different organizations are working in. But we are seeing now bringing that information that existing in different parts into one common document that all of us can be able to utilize in reaching out to our young people in the nation and even including the region. And equally, we are also realizing that main challenge that exists in our schools, whereby in relation to conservation education, is lack of learning materials. As an organization, we are coming in through this project to address that gap by providing these learning materials to their schools that we are focusing on. There are 137. and basically sharing content that learners can easily adopt to, they can easily work with through learners' activity books, having posters they can relate in their landscape, and addressing issues that are engaging each and every day. And as I mentioned earlier, we also working in 7 counties across the landscape. But in those counties, we're identifying 2 main schools, whereby we're building the capacity for them to be centers of excellence. In this case, in any other partner or interested parties coming to the landscape, they have something they can draw in terms of conservation education and how that model can be able to be integrated in the bigger scope of education. And lastly, we are also building the capacity of 10 young champions from clubs to act as change agents in their communities, to be able to infuse this knowledge and even be able to robustly engage the young people in their localities, in the areas that they come from in terms of conservation education and championing the aspect of wildlife conservation in the areas of reach. Our main outcome of this program is basically to increase the number of youth who are able confidently to champion aspect of conservation at their local communities and even across the nation, which basically will be able to address the most challenge that we are facing right now in terms of human-wildlife conflict, to create a space whereby human and wildlife can coexist together peacefully. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what the Conservation Education Project is all about.
Okay. So how will this scholarship be supported to become ambassadors for conservation in their communities, and why it is so important to focus on young people as agents of change in conservation in Kenya?
Yeah, it is indeed. If I may say that conservation education itself is a component of learning that promotes an understanding and appreciation of the natural environment, and people will automatically be able to understand how we need to protect and conserve what we have. And this is not limited to a classroom setup. It's more likely to engage on the outside classroom, whereby we have outdoor activities and hands-on engagements that young people can engage in. And through that, how we are engaging the young people is, first of all, we're incorporating, incorporation of conservation education into the regular learning, whereby we can have conservation education into the normal learning that happen in a classroom, which will, in a Kenyan setup, we do appreciate that even the government is realizing this. And through the current curriculum, that is the competency-based curriculum, we are seeing components of conservation education being entrenched in the day classroom learning. In addition, we are also working to build the capacity of teachers, because we want to increase the contact hours that these children will be able to have, or rather the learners in our schools will be able to have. And the only way we can do that is to be able to support the patrons, or rather the teachers who are actively engaged with the learners. And equally, we're also supporting conservation clubs with learning materials to be able to have something that they can refer to. And in addition, we're also working with just having regular visits to these schools, just to monitor and also support where there is need. And we are doing that perfectly with the current model that the Wildlife Clubs is using, that is through the mobile van visit, whereby we reach out to these schools in remote areas, we share videos with the learners, we get a first-hand experience engaging with them, and they'll be able to address, and we'll be able to address answers in just a sense of curiosity that exists within a classroom setup in relation to conservation education. And we are also in the process of developing a conservation education curriculum, which now will not only be limited to the learners in the schools that we are covering in, or rather the landscape that we are in, but now it will broaden the scope to either in the Kenyan perspective and also across the region. And that one will also be able to achieve through the current partnership that we have with Wildlife Clubs of Kenya, because that is also anchored in this aspect of sustainability. even when a project ends, we'll always sure that whatever work that we've started with these learners can be able to be sustained because of the efforts and the initiative that we have been able to carry together with the Wildlife Clubs of Kenya. So I will say that engaging the young people in conservation is very important because in real sense, they will be able to champion the work that we are doing with a point of understanding rather than just doing it from a perspective of learning.
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Mr. Akach, how does the project aim to shift youth, especially in communities where wildlife, it seems, more as burden than a benefit?
Thank you so much. I must mention here that we work in these communities where some of the problems that are connected to wildlife conservation are a reality. Talk about human-wildlife conflict. It is a daily reality. If which you can unpack further to crop destruction, talk about livestock predation, and even danger to human life. So the project does not just talk about conservation in a world of fantasy or from just only ecological point of view, but we are connecting it to real community needs. Through the school wildlife clubs, storytelling, and digital learning tools that we're also trying to incorporate learners to be able to interact with, because we have realized that learners have got a very high affinity to digital tools. So we are helping young people to understand the benefits of biodiversity so that when they look at that elephant, they are seeing revenue from tourism. When they look at that lion, these young children are seeing employment. When they see an hyena, they are looking at an environmental cleaner. The zebra is able to tell them that this is purely a lot of benefits that we have from biodiversity. So it's all about shifting the mindset of the learner from the phrase that we can talk about to be wildlife is a threat to a new phrase that would be wildlife is part of our future, not just future, but a bright and sustainable future.
All right. Just in closing, why is the partnership with the AWF in the project crucial?
Wow. I must say here that African Wildlife Foundation has been a partner to Wildlife Clubs of Kenya for some time. And today we're talking about another special partnership that is now focusing on this great project that we are proudly talking about, the Young Conservation Heroes. So African Wildlife Foundation, remember its foundation can be traced back to early 1961, just a few years before the Wildlife Clubs of Kenya was formed. That means that the African Wildlife Foundation is bringing to us a very special technical expertise, a very strong conservation experience, and they are deeply connected to the community. They have done a lot of community engagement, especially in the Tsavo Landscape, where they have a landscape office. So their support has really helped us to be able to expand our reach as Wildlife Clubs of Kenya and eventually our impact, especially through the mobile van visits, which I lead. Together with AWF, we are able to reach even the most remote schools. Sometimes when we revisit the schools in the project, we are driving a number of kilometers off the highways. And so we are ensuring that young people in those areas who are not able to benefit from those schools, which are like those schools which are in the modern urban centers, they're not left behind in conservation conversations that we are driving.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Unfortunately, with time not being on our side, we can't carry on with this conversation, but we hope that if we invite you again, you'll avail yourselves.
We wish we can talk until the sunset.
Yeah, bo. You know how time flies when you're having fun.
Sure.
Yes. All right. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
We truly appreciate this time. Thank you so much. And looking forward for another moment.
Wow. Yes, definitely. We're definitely having another one. Thank you so much.